Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Talk Kashrus, presented by the Kashrus Awareness Project in conjunction with Torah Anytime. Today, I am privileged to be joined by Rabbi Yochanan Schnall, Rabbinic Coordinator with the CRC Chicago Rabbinical Council. Thank you, Rabbi Schnall, for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Now, I know that at the CRC, besides for being a Rabbinic Coordinator, you have an expertise, and that is that you oversee the transportation, Kashrus of transportation, which to me is just incredible. Just to think about it, that there's a department that focuses just on transportation. So I'm just wondering, is the CRC the only major Kashrus organization that has that sort of department?
No, several other major Kashrus organizations have that. The CRC is really logistically, we're situated in the Midwest, and that's like the crossroads of America, where you have a lot of transportation going back and forth and everything. So, Baruch Hashem, I think we might be the only one that has such an emphasis on transportation.
And you say that's largely because of your location,
Sure.
So it makes sense. Now,
Right.
when we talk about Kashrus of transportation, are we talking about food trucks? Are we talking about tankers? You know, I mean, you know, from schmoozing you about this, I know that people will often ask, you know, I saw a tanker truck with a kosher symbol on it. Why in the world would gasoline or something like that need kosher certification? Now, obviously, it's more than that, right? These trucks are carrying real food.
In fact, you know, if you look at a tanker truck, you'll see next time you go on the highway, you'll see that there's really two shapes. You'll have it looks like an oval. Those are the ones which are carrying gasoline. And then the round ones are actually not carrying gasoline. They're carrying any other type of liquid. They can be carrying milk. They can be carrying orange juice. They can be carrying ketchup. They can be carrying, you know, oils and stuff. So there's thousands of these trailers that are hauling food products every day.
Right. So to certify a truck, what does that entail? I mean, let's walk through the process.
Yeah, sure. So it's actually funny when we go to go see a tanker, you know, and when we start up with a kosher program for transportation, very often we ask, oh, you know, how are you going to see our tankers? We have, you know, 50 tankers, and all they're spread across the country, or they're, you know, how are you going to go see them, bless them, and you know, that's what the guy would think that we bless them,
Right?
But really, we don't actually have to see the tanker. Once we kosher it, which we could talk about in a minute, but once it's set up in the kosher program, we actually monitor it using paperwork, because there's a very complex structure that these trucking companies utilize in order for them to oversee their hauls. And we ride on that, we use that, and we require that they submit reports to us to show exactly what they hauled. We have a whole system in place.
Do you actually have a tracking system to track where a truck is going, when it's emptied, when it's refilled?
That's a good question. So the larger companies, the way that they work is they have the logistics software, because they have thousands of trailers, and they need that. So we just require that they submit a monthly report to us of all of the trailers, you know, all the hauls that they did, so that we can audit that. We also certify very small companies, you know, mom and pop places, that they're literally writing down on a piece of paper what they did. So how do we monitor that? So it really depends on each industry. Some industries, they simply cannot haul anything else in their tankers. Their tankers are very specific for that type.
When you're saying specific, let's say to orange juice or to milk or to something like that?
Let's say more like let's say a dairy, like a milk, you know, from that's hauling raw milk. Let's say, for example, they're not going to be hauling anything else in that type of tanker. It's a very unique type of tanker, but and
it's obviously a refrigerator tanker, right?
But it's actually no, believe it or not, no. These tankers, a 3A tanker, they're insulated. And believe it or not, they could actually haul milk from, let's say, I would say Wisconsin or Minnesota, all the way to New York, which could take 2-3 days, and in the summer. And the milk will still...
And it's not refrigerated.
Right. It's not refrigerated, but the milk will still remain under, I don't remember exactly the threshold, but it has to be delivered under like 30 degrees. They measure it when it gets delivered, and if it's above that, they reject it, you know, the incoming plant. But but just the sheer, you know, size of these containers are really able to hold the milk.
That's very interesting.
In the fact that they're insulated, yeah. Regarding the smaller companies, some of them, the way that we track them, we actually started using very sophisticated technology, which is that we require that they put trackers on the tanker. And that this way we could actually see and you know, audit based on those trackers. We could see wherever it is, you know, they'll submit a report like any other company, right? And then we go back to on our online portal and we say, okay, well, you know, does this make sense? This trailer was traveling in these places. and we line it up to make sure that it actually adds up to what they're
When you say adds up, meaning it didn't stay in one place too long, or it didn't
right. I mean, the biggest concern, right?
Yeah.
So we really talk about what are our concerns,
right?
Let's talk about that for a second.
Okay.
So how does a trailer become non-kosher? Right. Well, the way a trailer could become non-kosher is if, let's say, it hauled something which is non-kosher. Let's say you have lard, you have chicken fat, you have even issues with Kashrus, especially because these trailers are hauling for so long.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
The fact that a non-kosher item went through the truck would not necessarily make it non-kosher because it may not have been.
It's not heated.
It's not heated, right?
Right.
And but so what is the typical issue? Is it an issue of Kashrus? And again, for our viewers to understand, the issue of Kashrus is that when something remains enclosed for X period of time, so then it becomes absorbed into the walls of the tanker.
Right. So usually Kashrus would be 24 hours, unless it's a very strong product, which we could have like a vinegar or something like that. That would be even shorter, much shorter period of time. And a lot of these hauls are done for days.
Sure.
So that's the problem. Now, on top of that is that if you have a thicker, more viscous product, then there is heat that goes inside on the bottom of the trailer. There's like a steam line that runs through it. It's heated by the engine of the truck. And like chocolate would be a great example. Because
they don't want it to coagulate. Is
That's
that
right,
why
because then they won't be able to deliver it.
Right.
So that stays.
They want to leave it a liquid, so they have to raise the temperature.
That's right. And in fact, just as an interesting anecdote, we could talk about this at different time. It's just very fascinating.
Yeah.
Lately, especially with COVID, this became a big issue because a lot of these food manufacturers, they did not want to be stuck with supply shortages.
Right.
So we have, for example, a tank wash, which we'll talk about in a second. But a tank wash, they have this thing which is called a steam pad. What's a steam pad? Basically, is they have a service and they have steam coils that will plug into the back of the tanker.
Okay.
And they could have a tanker that's not being driven right now, but it's just on standby for delivery at a nearby chocolate factory, right? And the chocolate factory needs to make sure that their chocolate is, so they'll literally pay for dozens and dozens of these tankers to be fully loaded tankers, just to be standing there, and with a steam line that's going into them, and which is going to keep them heated and ready and liquid, so that they're able to deliver when they need to. So back to the Kashrus.
It's almost like these tankers become their storage facility
exactly
for them, right?
Right, that's exactly it. Right, and we have to monitor those tankers, because if, for example, they're hauling chocolate, they're almost for sure going to become dairy. And the next client that's going to want to let's say receive an oil shipment,
which you want to be part of.
Exactly, right.
So, let's say that's a great example. Let's take that example.
Yeah.
You have trucks with chocolate for a long enough period of time where it's a concern, and now you want to do an oil shipment. What do you do?
So what we do is every tanker has a designation. There's a certificate for the tanker. That's how they know it's kosher. The food manufacturer, they'll ask them, how do we know that it was delivered on a kosher tanker? They have a certificate that shows that it was delivered, that it was kosher. So we would indicate on that tanker, let's say tanker 757, and it'll say the word dairy right next to it. So that will now be the burden on the food manufacturer. When that delivery comes in, he reviews the kosher letter and he sees what does it say on the kosher letter, and he sees, it says that's dairy. Okay, is that an issue or not? Most food manufacturers wouldn't care, but we do have some that do. I mean, we just had an issue of maybe a year ago that there was actually a meat processing plant, and the Kashrus agency called us like, "What's going on? We see that it was delivered on a dairy trailer."
Oh wow.
So, we obviously did, exactly, we had to figure out how severe was the issue, and we worked with them, and, but going forward, we pointed out to them that we always indicate on the certificate if that trailer has been hauling dairy or not.
So let's say it had been hauling dairy, and now you want to produce this powerful oil, or
That's a good question.
So do you actually kosher the truck?
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So in general, let's say we have a new client. He has,
he has a fleet of
50 trailers, tankers, and we don't know what their prior history is. And how do we kosher that? Can you imagine, koshering these huge tankers?
Right.
So there's a multi-billion-dollar industry, maybe even trillion, for all I know, called a tank wash. You might see you're driving down the highway, and you see a sign or a tank wash or something like that. And most people think that just means that they're going to wash the outside of the truck. But really, is the tanker, if you think about it, a tanker that was just hauling mustard, let's say, right? If the next product is going to be, let's say, corn syrup, right? The corn syrup is going to start tasting like mustard.
Sure.
Right?
So it has nothing to do with the Kashrus issue.
Nothing to do with the Kashrus, right? Exactly.
It's the quality of the next item.
Exactly. So what they do is after the load, the tanker will stop by a tank wash, and they'll wash it out. Now, the standard tank wash has 3 steps. They have what's called a flush, which is they just rinse out whatever's in there.
Okay.
The next step is the actual wash itself, which has detergent or very strong detergent. It depends on what they're washing out. Sometimes they have like a caustic, really strong solutions.
And that'll be relevant to kashrus because it's a davar apagim.
That's right.
As
Yes,
far as
that's where I'm
kashrus.
going. Right.
Okay.
And then the next step, the final step, is called the rinse. The final rinse, just to
rinse.
rinse out. This is taking it before we get to kashrus.
Okay.
This is really what they have. They have these 3 steps. And this is just the standard. So what the kosher agencies do is we utilize those, and we say, okay, well, let's have the detergent wash. Let's make that into the pagim. The final rinse, let's make that into the koshering. Now there are challenges, and just an interesting challenge that your listeners might be interested in hearing. Just like a little glimpse into how you really have to understand technology. You really have to know how different things work. It came to my attention that we were a lot of agencies, a lot of different washes were relying on the pagim, on that detergent wash.
Right.
But I was thinking, the detergent wash has to be a certain temperature in order to be considered a pagim.
Right.
So the temperature of the very thick, let's say palm oils, would be good 170 degrees, 170.
In order to clean it out thoroughly.
No. I mean, what I mean to say is
when it's transported?
being transported, right?
Okay.
So there is a chazanish that says that in order for it to be pagim, right?
It has to be at that temperature?
Exactly, because
is that
we don't know.
Yes,
we don't know exactly what the temperature is that it's going to absorb, right? That's going to be bilea. So therefore, the pagim has to be the same temperature at least as what it could have been. What was interesting is that a lot of these detergents, the companies, the recommended manufacturer guidelines was to use that, let's say 140, 150 degrees, which that wouldn't be hot enough to be considered a pagim. So I actually went to, one example, I went to a client and I was like, why are you doing it at 140? Maybe you could bump it up to closer to 180. And he's like, no, we can't, because if you look at the recommendations, it says not to do that.
Are they afraid it's going to ruin the tanker?
Well, they didn't know. They thought maybe it wouldn't work, that it would ruin the detergent or the caustic or whatever.
Okay.
So I was like, well, what company are you using for the detergent? It turns out the CRC actually certifies that.
Oh, really?
Yes, we certified it. So I reached out to the Rabbinic Coordinator who was involved in that company. I was like, can you do me a favor? Let's find out exactly what's going on here. Okay, they could go higher. And their response is, yeah, of course it could go up to 212 degrees, no problem. So I said, so then why are you putting that? It's like, your clients are. They said, yeah, that's just recommended numbers because most of the applications are within that range. So that's why we put it in there. But of course, it could be much higher. Exactly. Wow. So, that's just an example of how, we always try to, think out of the box. Don't take things for granted. Always, look and try to figure out, like, what's exactly holding them back from being able to utilize this for kashrus and doing it accordingly.
Wow.
Yeah.
So finishing off on this.
So yes, let's get back to this. So what we do to kosher is we have a client. They say, okay, we have these trailers. We need to kosher them.
Right.
So usually the standard is that we need to have actually the mashgiach who's there, who's going to sign off to say that these trailers were there and they were koshered accordingly.
So you actually need a mashgiach during the wash.
During the detergent wash and then during the koshering wash. That's the standard. Some of the more modern tank wash facilities, they'll have everything pre-programmed. So what it's called a wash recipe. The recipe is depending on what the priors are, what used to be hauled inside of those tankers.
Right.
They have that all set up. Okay, if it was hauling chocolate, then they just push the chocolate button, and if it's it
will do a certain type of wash?
Right. It'll do the exact time and temperature and detergent, whatever. So
and is that something that you could watch remotely? You could actually.
Well, believe it or not, it will record what it did. So then we have the same thing when it comes to a kosher upgrade. We say, okay, well, let's create a kosher upgrade formula, right?
And
so
then
they call it recipe, and they push the button, and then it automatically records that this is what happened. And then on top of which is that you have to also realize that we're measuring the temperatures, right? When the spray is spraying throughout the tanker, right, it gets cooled off. Especially if you're in Chicago in the middle of the winter, it can get cooled off.
Meaning the temperature that it is when it comes out of the
spray,
and when it reaches the other end of the truck is not going to be the same.
That's right. Right. Well, the way it works, I don't know if I mentioned this, but the way it works is that you have in the top of a tanker, you have it's called a manway, which is like it's like a lid, like a dome lid.
Right. That opens.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So most of them have like one. Some might have 2 or 3. And then they lower like a spinner. It looks like almost like you're saying to make a good example. It would almost be like, think of like a very complex dishwasher spinner. Okay. But it's much more, a lot more spinning being done and stuff like. Yeah, there's a lot more that's going on there. But it gets lowered inside of it and then just spins around, in all different directions. So when it leaves that spinner, it could be even 200 degrees. But by the time it exits the trailer, it might only be 160 degrees, which wouldn't be enough to
Right.
for kosher. So we have to make sure that the temperatures are being measured as it's leaving.
As it's leaving the truck.
Right. So that's another thing that we there's a lot that goes into setting up a wash facility to make sure that they're able to kosher properly.
And typically the companies are okay with that? Like
Yeah, they want. I mean, in fact, they embrace kosher. Believe it or not, I work with these guys all the time, and I find them they're so respectful when it comes to kosher. Many of them, especially when you go to the South, they think that we're blessing the trailer. We're doing all these things. But, we explain to them it's purely technical what we're doing, but they're very respectful. They really want it. They want it to be done right, and it's really incredible.
Are the tankers typically all created equal, or are there products that are more complex to kosher after than others? I know you mentioned chocolate, oil. I would imagine oil, for example, which is probably harder to clean, right?
No, chocolate, believe it or not,
chocolate is more difficult?
The hardest food product is chocolate.
To clean a truck from?
To clean a truck from, yeah. Because a lot of times, even after they deliver it, they're not interested. The trailer is not going to be heating it anymore. So when it comes to when they wash it out, there's actually people that have to be going inside
and
of
scrape.
They have like these picks and stuff.
Really?
To pick it out. I mean,
what
it's
a
really,
job.
Yeah,
wow.
It's really, really.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So you would say is chocolate the most difficult of all?
So for when we get there to kosher it, we require that the trailer is already clean. So that's we're really after all that, So
by the time you get the truck to do the koshering, it's a clean truck.
That's
now the
right,
question is just from a halachic standpoint what the hechsher kalim process looks like.
Exactly. Yeah.
Rabbi Schnall, thank you again for being here discussing today about tankers. And Mirz Hashem, the next time we meet, we'll continue our discussion and focus on rail cars and stationary tanks.
Sure. It's a topic in itself.
Thank you.